Alrighty, welcome everybody back to another video here on the channel. If you don't know me by now, my name is David. I also go by MillerFootball, and today we're going to be continuing my series where I'm going division by division, team by team, and pick by pick to hand out my draft grades for the 2023 NFL Draft. It's not apparent by the team on your screen right now. We're going to be talking about the AFC West today, as we've already covered the NFC North, AFC North, and NFC West. I'm way behind on these. I know I got to get these out quicker. Life's hectic, so you got to excuse me, but I'm in a position now where I can just keep rolling these along. So you're going to see a bunch more of these coming out over the next couple weeks, so if you're interested in that, definitely make sure to subscribe. We're making that push for 200 subscribers. But in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and talk about the AFC West, like I said, and please keep in mind when I'm giving out these grades that at the end of the day, this is my opinion. I'm just a 20-year-old college kid with way too much free time on my hands that decided to spend a lot of that watching tape this offseason. So when I say I don't like a player that was picked by a certain team, I'm not saying I know better than their GM. In fact, we're going to get to a team that I know I don't know better than their GM, and I really don't like what they did. We'll talk about more of that in a couple minutes here, but like I said, I don't know any better than any of these GMs. I don't think I do. I just have my opinions, and I'm down to share them. I like to share them. People seem to like it when I share them, so we're going to go ahead and share them. But yeah, like I said, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump into the Denver Broncos. So jumping into the Denver Broncos here, they were in a bit of a unique situation this year in the draft, as they only had 5 picks to work with. But I think they did pretty good with those 5 picks. Obviously, they gave up their first round selection to the New Orleans Saints, so they could go ahead and pick up a new head coach in Sean Payton, which, you know, in my opinion, is definitely worth a first round pick. I think that was an awesome move by Denver. You're getting probably the best offensive mind I've seen in the past 20 years, if not one of. It's like him and Andy Reid are kind of the 2 top dogs, and they're going to be going head-to-head twice a year, so it'll be interesting to see what they're able to cook up against each other. And of course, the big thing with the Broncos is you're hoping Sean Payton can help Russ cook, which I'm fully confident he can. I think the Broncos are going to be a decent bit better than they were last year. So let's go ahead and jump into this draft class, starting out with Marvin Mims, who they got with the final pick in the 2nd round. And I think this is a pretty solid selection. Mims wasn't like my favorite receiver in the class or anything. I had a true 3rd round grade on him, so just out of range of where I would have drafted him. I think this is fine. He was my 11th ranked wide receiver in the class, and we're looking at a guy, with good deep speed, good body control. He's got really good like highlight reel type of catches. It's just, I'm not super confident he's a guy that's going to step in day one and be a big piece in this receiver room. Obviously, you have Courtland Sutton, you have Jerry Jeudy, you have Tim Patrick, and, you know, there's been trade rumors circulating around Jeudy and Sutton, and they're not going to be here forever, so you're going to need someone to step up for them eventually, and I think Mims can do that down the line. He just needs to improve his ability to separate. That's definitely something I wasn't a big fan of his in college. His routes weren't super polished. His route tree as a whole just needs work. He wasn't running a lot of different routes. And he's got a slender frame, which grants itself issues with contact, which is going to hurt considering he's going to face more grabby and physical corners at the next level. But that speed and his body control and the type of things you see on his highlight reel are definitely enough to inspire confidence in the long term. So if you're looking at Mims as a developmental receiver that can eventually probably take over for Courtland Sutton, I do think this can be a good pick for them. Like I said, it's just not a home run pick because I don't think he's going to return any immediate dividends for them. But that being said, love the upside, love the long-term projection. Gonna give this a B. Again, if I thought he would start day one, it would be higher. Because of that, I can't give it any higher than a B, but I do like him as a developmental player for Denver. Speaking of developmental players, they snagged another one here in the 3rd round with the 4th pick in the 3rd round, and that's linebacker Drew Sanders out of Arkansas. Now, Sanders is somebody that I wasn't quite as high on as it seemed like a lot of people were. I know a lot of people think this was a big steal, but for me, I had a 3rd to 4th round grade on Sanders, so this is even a little bit earlier than I would have taken him. Top of the 3rd round is fine. I really don't like that he was the 2nd linebacker off the board. There were better guys out there, guys like Diane Hentley, but, you know, it's fine. He was LB5 for me. It's a really weak linebacker class, so that's not saying a whole lot. He's a converted edge rusher, but ironically, he's really, really good in coverage for a converted edge rusher. He can keep up with tight ends, he can keep up with running backs, and even some slower slot receivers he can keep up with. He's got good instincts in zone, he's got good range. Obviously, that converted edge will come into play when he's blitzing the quarterback. He's really good at that. It's just his run defense is all over the place. In fact, out of all the linebackers I watched in this class, he was he was definitely the worst tackler, which, if you know anything about me, that is a big deal for me with any defender. You know, I complain when my safeties can't tackle, let alone a linebacker, and I know we're getting into an era where linebackers are asked to do more in coverage than against the run, but I don't care. Tackling is a fundamental part of playing defense, and you're a goddamn linebacker. You need to be able to tackle well, and he just doesn't. His angles are poor, he doesn't wrap up properly. There needs to be development done as a tackler, and that's something that's a big turnoff for me coming into the league. And on top of that, he really struggles when it comes to diagnosing the run. His eyes will get lost against, more complex schemes, and he's not always going to find his gap, and he can be over-aggressive rather than waiting for things to develop. He does show flashes as a run defender. There are plays where you're thinking, oh, hey, maybe there's something there. And, perhaps he can develop, and obviously he's going to be working with a great defensive staff in Denver, so work can definitely be done there. So as a developmental guy, I like Drew Sanders, especially for Denver. Like I said, I have a lot of confidence in their coaching staff. So while I don't think this is a home run steal like I've seen some people say, I do think it's a solid pick. So again, I'm going to give this pick a B. Just a solid developmental linebacker here in the third round, and, you can't complain too much with that. Continuing on in the third round, we're looking at pick 20 this time, and that is cornerback Riley Moss out of Iowa. And, it just warms my heart to see a white boy corner getting drafted, especially on day 2. These guys are so few and far between at this point. They're like an anomaly. If you've seen Across the Spider-Verse, shout out to you. It's a fantastic movie. But Moss, he fits the stereotype. Grit, high effort, high motor, first guy in, last guy out, all that good stuff. Very physical, very tough. Just kind of your stereotypical slot corner. Very disciplined guy, super, super smart. He's not the quickest. He's not the twitchiest, and he's going to have some issues in man coverage because of that. But if you're looking for a slot corner, I think Riley Moss is one of the better ones in this class. I had a 4th round grade on him. He was CB 13 for me. So again, a little higher than I would have taken him, but again, can't fault them for this pick. They wanted a slot corner. They're getting a good slot corner. So I'm going to give this a B. Like the pick a lot. But again, just because it was earlier than I would have taken him, I don't feel right giving him any higher than a B here. And then we move on to the 6th round, pick 183, the 6th pick in the 6th round. And Denver got one of the biggest steals of the draft in Boise State safety J.L. Skinner. To put it bluntly, this guy is, diet Cam Chancellor, right? I hate doing player-to-player comparisons because I feel like it sets unreasonable expectations for young players, and also no two players are exactly the same. But J.L. Skinner will tell you, he grew up idolizing Bam Bam Cam, and you can very much tell that from his game. This dude has a legitimate bloodlust when it comes to hitting people, and I absolutely adore it. Now, for me, I had a late 1st round, early 2nd round grade on Skinner, so getting him in the 6th round is crazy. I understand why he fell. He's dealing with a torn pec, which caused him to drop a good bit, but he was the 2nd best safety in the class, in my opinion. The best one, not named Brian Branch, who was one of the 10 best players in the class for me. So getting him in the 6th round is fantastic value. On top of his literal bloodlust, he wants to kill people on the field. He's a big dude, 6'4", 209 pounds. He's a really good athlete for that size, high motor, super disciplined. Not only will he light you up, but his down-to-down consistency as a tackler and his technique are both off the charts. Very, very explosive when it comes to that short area, like right alongside the line of scrimmage. He's very fluid for his size, but he's not like an elite mover. Same thing with his long speed. It's really good, but not quite elite. And he does struggle to flip his hips, and changing direction is a bit of a struggle for him. But he's not going to be asked to do that a whole lot here in Denver. He's mainly, they run a system where your safeties are playing as traditional safeties. They're not doing this whole cover 4 thing that a lot of the leagues doing, thanks to Vic Fangio, where your safeties need to play like a nickel corner. That's not the case. You're going to have JL Skinner play deep, or you're going to have him come up and play run defense. Like, it's pretty much free safety, strong safety, baseline designations here in Denver, and that's great for him. And, he is a little bit versatile. He can play free safety, he can play strong safety, you can play him up on the line of scrimmage, you can play him in the box in some packages. Like, there's a lot to be excited about with Skinner. So I'm going to give the Broncos an A+ for this pick. Absolutely knocked it out of the park. Like I said, I get why he fell. The injury sucks, but I don't care. He's one of my favorite players in the class, one of the best DBs in the class, and I think this is a big-time steal for Denver. And finally, in the 7th round, the Denver Broncos selected center Alex Forsyth out of Oregon, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here. This is a center in the 7th round. I will say I had a much higher grade on him than this. I had a late 3rd, early 4th round grade, so I think it's really, really good value. But at the end of the day, you're looking at a backup center that, maybe can compete for a starting job down the road, but either way, he's going to come in right away, be a good backup, be good depth, and you can never have too much depth on the offensive line, so I'm going to give this pick a B+. Just really, really good depth pick, really good pick here in the 7th round for sure. So as a whole, even though Denver took some guys a little bit higher than maybe I would have, I really like their draft class. They came away with a lot of talent, a lot of high upside, and overall, just for having, 5 picks, none of which in the 1st round, I think they did pretty damn good. So I'm going to give Denver a B+. I really like what they did. JL Skinner is one of the biggest steals of the draft, and the first 3 guys they went with aren't half bad either. Moving on to the Kansas City Chiefs, this is going to be a team that it's going to be hard for me to evaluate because at the end of the day, I trust Brett Veach. The dude obviously knows what he's doing. There's a reason the Chiefs are coming off a Super Bowl win and have been one of the most dominant teams in the NFL since since the year after they drafted Patrick Mahomes, when he went absolutely nuclear and never looked back. But I also really don't like what they did. Like, if I'm being blunt, spoiler alert, this was not a class I was a big fan of, and I know I'm not alone in saying that. A lot of people have, expressed their concerns, we'll say, for what Kansas City did. So I guess we'll just quit stalling and go ahead and jump into it. And starting out with the first pick, they took edge rusher Felix Anudike-Uzomah with the 31st pick. And I'm kind of torn on this pick because on one hand, I like Uzomah for the Chiefs. Like, they needed a really good number 2 edge to pair with George Karlaftis, who I'm a big fan of. I loved him last year, and they're hoping he can be like the true alpha in that room, right? And Anudike-Uzomah is a good scheme fit and just seems like the type of guy that can step in for Frank Clark right away and be a really, really nice Robin to Karlaftis' Batman. And every time we talk about edge rushers in this video, I'm probably going to use that phrase, that expression, whatever you want to call it. So be prepared to hear that about 15 times. But either way, when it comes to Uzomah, I had a 2nd round grade on him. He was the 7th highest rated edge. So a little earlier than I would have taken him because he just was a guy that screamed day 2 pick. He doesn't have these elite high-end traits that you want in a top dog for your edge room, right? You want somebody that's super athletic or super strong or something along those lines, and he just doesn't have any of that. But what he does have is fantastic technique. We're looking at, one of the smartest and craftiest edge rushers in this class. He knows how to use his pass rushing tool belt to his advantage very, very well. He's very good when it comes to counters, and he seems to have a great understanding of what offensive tackles are going to do to try and stop him, and he knows how to counter that and how to get around that. Now, how that's going to translate to the NFL when your tackles are better, stronger, faster, more technically refined, and just overall smarter is a bit of a question mark. I don't think it's like the make or break. I think he'll be fine, but definitely something you'll have to take into consideration at least at the very start. But that being said, he's just a high floor edge who's really smart and really crafty, and I think will pair nicely with Karlaftis. He does need some work as a run defender, but he has the tools to be a good one because of his length and his willingness to get down and dirty and tackle somebody. And at the end of the day, looking at this pick, it just seems like the Chiefs were prioritizing need over best player available, which when you're coming off a Super Bowl win, makes sense because you're looking at your roster and you're like, oh no, we now have a hole because they got rid of Frank Clark, so let's fill it. And I get that. I totally get that. They want a guy who's going to come in and, be impactful right away, considering they're a team that's contending right away. So I get it. I don't hate the pick. It's just, I feel like they could have went other routes. So I'm going to give this a B+. Like I said, I think Uzomah fits them very, very well. He's a high floor player, It makes a lot of sense. I like the pick. And then we get to the second round, and everything I just said about Uzomah, throw it out of the window because I have no clue what Veach was cooking here. They took Rashee Rice with the 55th overall pick, and oh my god, I gotta tell you, not a fan. I am not a fan. I had a round 4 to round 5 grade on the guy. He was my 19th highest rated wide receiver, and for reference, I watched about 21 wide receivers. But that being said, it's going to be really hard to judge Rice harshly because he's going to be playing with Patrick Mahomes. And Patrick Mahomes could make Dale from down the street look like prime Randy Moss if he really wanted to, because he's that guy. So at the very least, Rice has a path to be productive, and anyone like myself that isn't a fan is going to look goofy when the guy has like 600-700 yards as wide receiver 3. But just in terms of projection, in terms of him as a prospect, I just don't see it. There were a lot of better options available. And I'm not going to sit here and name off guys. Just imagine a receiver that was available at pick 55, and I probably think he was better than Rice. We'll put it that way. I will say he does have a similar skill set to Juju Smith-Schuster in a way. He's not super fluid, he's not super fast, but he builds up speed decently, like his acceleration is solid. He's a big body guy. He can win tough catches, not going to do it consistently, but he can do it. And, he's got that big body that'll allow him to run block a little bit if he wants to. But the big thing with Rice for me is his release is terrible. I mean, like all-time in the gutter dog water bad. If you press him at all, he's done. He's not fast enough to beat it, he's not strong enough to beat it, and he doesn't have the technique to beat it. So you put a press corner on him, he's not going anywhere. He's going to stand there looking like he doesn't know what the fuck's going on. He's also not a good route runner, and he's just not going to be a good separator as a whole. So basically what you're looking at here in the second round is somebody that's going to fall on a scale between Juju Smith-Schuster and N'Keal Harry. And I don't know if that's what you want to be doing in the second round. You had plenty of other options. I mean, I could name a billion, but you went with Rashee Rice. I just don't get it. I'm giving this pick a D-. Again, I don't want to quite give it an F because he's going to be playing with Mahomes, and I can kind of see why they like him because of the whole Juju thing. But oh my god, this was a horrible, horrible pick if you ask me. Then we move on to the third round, pick 92, and I don't have quite as much to say here as they took offensive tackle Wanya Morris out of Oklahoma. I had a round 3 to round 4 grade on this guy, so you're taking him towards the back end of the third round. Solid value there. He's just somebody that's going to be good depth, and maybe could even potentially compete with Lucas Niang for a starting tackle spot. He was like my 7th highest rated tackle in the class. Double check, yep, he was exactly 7th. So just a good pick. You're getting a guy here at the tail end of the third round that very well may be a starter, and we know how good the Chiefs are at drafting linemen, so, I like the pick a lot. I'm going to give this a B+. Not quite an A, just because he's not a superstar or anything. I don't think he's a superstar at least, but I think he can be a really solid starting tackler, at the very least high-end depth. So definitely a good pick here by the Chiefs. Definitely like this a lot more than the Rashee Rice pick. Next up in the fourth round with the 119th pick, they took Shamari Connor. I believe that's how you say his name. I'm not exactly there yet with his name. I suck with names. I've talked about this before. But Connor's not somebody I got to before the draft, so I'm still a little bit new to what's going on with him. But if I were to have graded him before the draft, I probably would have put him somewhere in the 7th round. He's just a super, super, super raw safety. He's a great athlete. There's definitely upside there. And we've seen the Chiefs gamble on DBs on day 3 and have it pay off. So who knows, Connor could easily be the next one of those guys. And truthfully, you look at him physically in terms of his athleticism, in terms of his build, reminds you a lot of Juan Thornhill. And we saw the Chiefs, be pretty successful with Juan Thornhill back there. So maybe that's their plan. Maybe they see Connor as Thornhill's replacement. I will say he lacks instincts and coverage. He doesn't have the greatest ball production. But if you can channel that athleticism and, have him playing in a role like Juan Thornhill, then hey, maybe there's something there. But for now, I do think this is a reach. So I'm going to give it a C-. Not quite a D, but not something I'm super impressed by. Moving into the 5th round, and speaking of developmental prospects, the next player on our list for the Chiefs here is edge rusher B.J. Thompson out of Stephen F. Austin. That's right, out of Stephen F. Austin. This is a guy that if you watch Brett Coleman, you'll probably be familiar with. He was a big fan of his. And as much as I love and respect Brett, dude's like my idol when it comes to this whole content creation thing, I just can't get behind it. I'm not a big B.J. Thompson guy. He was a round 6, round 7 grade for me. He was edge 31 out of 40, and he spent 6 years in college. So there's a lot not to like. He's super raw. He's not a good tackler by any means. In fact, he's really bad as a tackler. He's older. He's like 23, 24 years old. Not a good run defender. There's no plan there as a pass rusher. He just kind of says fuck it and does whatever he wants. He doesn't have good balance. He doesn't use his hands well. He lacks power and strength. Like, you're looking at this guy and he's got this big frame. You're like, oh my God, he could put on muscle. He could get a lot bulkier and really mess some dudes up, and he just hasn't. And there have been questions about his work ethic. I can't remember what school he was at before Stephen F. Austin, but he got kicked off the football team for his work ethic. So there's definitely a lot of concerns there. But that being said, at Stephen F. Austin, he did look like he was turning things around. So you're kind of hoping he matured. That's going to be the big thing here. He's a super freaky athlete, ran a 4.56 40, and he just moves like a safety. He's not moving out there like a pass rusher. He's moving like a DB, which is crazy. He's got explosive hips. His burst and his get off are really good, and he cooked at the Shrine Bowl. He looked really good at the Shrine Bowl. So if you can, kind of, I don't want to say discipline this guy, but you can get his head right and kind of hone those athletic traits, Thompson can be a world beater. But I need to see a lot from him before I'm ready to make the assumption that he will become that, obviously. So because of these quote-unquote character concerns, I don't want to call it that, it's a work ethic issue, and his age and just how raw he is, again, I'm going to give this a C-. I had, again, a round 6, round 7 grade on him, taking him here in the 5th round, towards the end, granted, but I'm still just not a big fan of him as a player. Again, guy that can't tackle, and you know how I feel about defensive players that can't tackle. Moving on to the 6th round, the Chiefs' next selection was defensive tackle Keandre Coburn out of Texas, and I like this pick a decent bit more than the last two. I actually like Coburn a little bit. I had a late round 5, early round 6 grade, so, about where I would have taken him, if not a little bit later. He was the 14th ranked interior defensive lineman for me, and, he just seems like he's going to be a consistent depth guy, and good at that. He could develop into a really nice starting nose tackle because he's a space eater with a really low center of gravity and good leverage. Those are all very, very good traits in a nose tackle. He definitely has the size to do it. He just needs to be a little bit more consistent with his technique, and he's not the best pass rusher in the world. So if you're going to bring him in as a nose tackle, play him about 10 snaps a game, close to the goal line, or, in short yardage situations, things like that, he can be an impactful player for you. He's not an every down defensive tackle, but there's definitely something there. Good value in the 6th round, so I'm going to give this a B+. I like this pick quite a bit. And finally, with their 7th round selection, this being pick 250, the Chiefs selected cornerback Nick Jones out of Ball State. That's right, Ball State, folks. Jokes aside, I'm going to be honest, I'm not super familiar with Jones's game. I didn't watch him before the draft, and he's not this superstar athlete, so this isn't a high upside guy. He's just tough, he's smart, and he can be a good special teamer. Maybe he develops into a slot corner for you, he's got the skill set to do that, but at the end of the day, this is a special teamer. You're taking him at the end of the 7th round, pick 33. It's fine. Again, not a world beater, not a home run pick, but it's fine. 7th round, you're just looking for a guy that's going to make your final 53. And hell, Nick Jones has about as good of a chance as any other special teamer on the Chiefs, so I'm going to give this one a B. I think it's a pretty solid pick. And again, 7th round, you just want somebody that's going to make the team. So overall, I'm really not a big fan of what the Chiefs did here. Like, they got some solid pieces, don't get me wrong, but you reach heavy in the 2nd round. You spend your 4th and a 5th round pick on some big-time gambles, which I know it's the Chiefs, they can afford to do that, but still, I'm grading off process with that kind of stuff, and I don't love it for them. So as a whole, I'm going to give them a C. Not quite the worst draft in the world, but also not super far off from it either this year. I think I gave the Niners a C-, and they're my lowest grade so far, so they're the defending champs, and Brett Veach is probably going to make me look like a dumbass at some point, but I don't care. I'm really not a fan of this draft class at all. Moving on over to the Las Vegas Raiders, I absolutely love what they did in the draft this year, and they started out hot by taking one of, if not my favorite player in the entire class, a Mr. Tyree Wilson, the edge rusher out of Texas Tech. I gotta tell you, man, I maybe overrate the guy a little bit, but I don't care. Wilson was, for me, the top edge rusher in the class, and yes, I mean that over Will Anderson Jr., who we'll talk about once we get to the Texans. I have my opinions on him. Some of you may already know those. If not, you'll learn then. But Tyree Wilson was one of the 5 to 10 best players in this class, in my opinion, and the fact that he's going to get to learn from Chandler Jones and Max freaking Crosby is huge for him. Tyree Wilson, the one big gripe with him is he's not super refined. He's a little rough around the edges, so getting to learn from not one, but 2 of the best edge rushers of the past 15 years is going to be huge for him. The big thing with Wilson, you look at Wilson, his big standout trait is his length. He has 35-inch arms. His wingspan rivals Giannis Antetokounmpo. He has massive hands. He generates his speed into power very, very well. He can win outside despite not being the bendiest guy in the world, which is super, super important. And right away, even without this refinement that he's going to need, you can bring him in and he's just going to fuck people up because he's a legitimate people mover. His bull rush is off the chain. I mean, I know it's going to be different in the NFL with bigger, stronger, more athletic tackles, but I don't care. At the end of the day, big, strong people are big, strong people, and there's still going to be offensive tackles in the NFL that this man can bully with his bull rush. And that's going to be huge. And it's not like that's the only way he can win. Again, he can win around the corner. He can win outside. He's got a really good anchor. He moves really well given his size. He's a big dude. He's 6'6", and he moves pretty well for that size. His long arms give him a really good tackle radius, which is one of my favorite parts about him. He's a great, great tackler. He's really, really good in run defense and has the potential to get even better in run defense. He just needs to develop that pass rush tool belt a little bit and kind of work out some of the kinks, right? That's all it is. But this dude is a athletic freak. He's a physical freak. He's a hard worker. He's big. He's mean. He's scary. He's like the goddamn Alaskan bullworm from SpongeBob, okay? And this guy, maybe as early as the end of next year, is going to be playing opposite Max Crosby. Good Lord, good luck even trying to stop those two, coming at your quarterback. I don't care who your tackles are, you're going to be in hell going up against them every week. So the other 3 teams in the AFC West, good luck when these 2 get their shit together. But as a whole, if it's not apparent, I'm giving this an A. I want to give it an A+, but I'm saving that for the big steals of the draft. So we're not going to go that far with it, but this is certainly an A, without a doubt. And then we move on to the 2nd round, and spoiler alert, the Raiders are getting another A for me as they selected tight end Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame. Now, I know there was a bit of a debate at the tight end position this year as to who the top dog was, but in my opinion, there really shouldn't have been. Michael Mayer was by far and away the best tight end in this class. He was certainly the most complete. Sure, he doesn't have the athletic upside that Dalton Kincaid had, but I don't care. Better blocker, more consistent hands, higher IQ. He's somebody that isn't the flashiest guy in the world, but he's going to get shit done. To be blunt, or to be frank, rather, the best way to put it is he's got that Jason Witten gene, but I think he can be better. like relative to the talent in the league. Like I don't think he's going to be better than Jason Witten all time, but I think when you look at the talent, I think Mayer's the type of guy that can get himself to be a top 5 tight end, especially, mainly I'm saying this is because of how weak the tight end talent in the NFL is right now. Like, you've got the top 5, maybe top 6 guys, and then it's a battle for mid, right? Like, there's a couple guys that maybe stand above the rest. Like, I like Cole Kmet or Pat Freiermuth, but, you know, after that, it's rough. But Mayer is going to come in right away and be a top 15, top 20 tight end in the NFL. I had a late round 1, early round 2 grade. It was tight end 1 for me, like I said. Great run blocker, super tough after the catch. He's a super consistent all-around player. His hands are really reliable. He's creative. He's super instinctive. He's just going to be like the perfect security blanket, which is huge considering their quarterback is probably Jimmy G. I know that's kind of up in the air right now because of his health. But whatever quarterback they get, you know, a tight end is a quarterback's best friend at the end of the day. And Michael Mayer is the perfect tight end for that type of quarterback. Like I said, his only flaw is he's not super athletic. And I know we all want Kyle Pitts, but it's a tight end. You know, sometimes you got to embrace tradition, and that's kind of what Michael Mayer is. So again, giving this pick an A, absolutely love it. Sucks that they lost Darren Waller, but with his age, and I guess not his age, he's still under 30, but his injury history and kind of where they were at with him, it makes sense to move on and get yourself a brand spanking new, reliable pass catcher. Then we move on to the 3rd round, and these 2 picks I think were reaches. We're going to start out with Byron Young from Alabama, and this guy's just your run-of-the-mill Alabama defensive tackle, right? I had a round 4 grade on him. He was my 11th ranked interior defensive lineman. He just doesn't have a true dominant trait. He's a jack of all trades, master of none type of guy. He's got good length, good get off. He's disciplined, has really good gap discipline. I guess technically that would be his standout trait. But, you know, on top of that, he has flashes of power. He has flashes of a good tool belt. He's a little bit undersized. And like I said, I think he's a bit of a reach here at the top of the 3rd round. But I do think he can be a solid run defender, especially as a depth piece. You know, the Raiders, the interior of their defensive line isn't anything special right now. So Young is probably going to get some solid playing time right away, and I think long-term can just be a solid, like, 3rd defensive tackle for them so they can keep fresh legs out there, which is never a bad thing. So as a whole, I'm going to give this a B. Again, it's a slight reach, but, you know, I get it. It's a fine pick. Their other 3rd round pick, 30 picks later, was spent on wide receiver Trey Tucker out of Cincinnati. And I'm going to be honest, outside of seeing him when I was watching Tyler Scott, I didn't get a whole lot of Trey Tucker before the draft, so I went back after the draft, did a little digging, and I didn't come away super impressed. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, this is a little bit higher than I probably would have taken him. He's a good route runner. He's a good, speedy, deep threat. But that's just kind of it. You know, he's kind of one-dimensional, and there were definitely guys on the board that were better than him at this point, including his teammate Tyler Scott, who I'm not complaining, he fell to my Bears. I'm super happy with him. But, you know, it's the Raiders. They love themselves a speedy deep threat, and obviously they've been looking for a replacement since Henry Ruggs did something absolutely stupid. So I get why the Raiders wanted him. Makes sense for them. Again, just a little bit earlier than I would have taken him. I'm not super enamored by him as a player, so I'm going to give this a C+. Not the worst pick in the world, not the best, just kind of mid. With their next pick, moving on to the 4th round, the 2nd pick in the 4th round. In fact, they took cornerback Jacorian Bennett out of Maryland, and I like this pick a good bit. He was a round 4 grade for me, CB15, so right about where I would have taken him. He's really good upside, he's a great athlete with really good speed, and the Raiders' cornerback room just isn't that good. He's a guy that's going to be able to compete probably right away for a prominent role in their secondary. I don't think he's going to be like a number 1, number 2 corner right away or anything, but I do think he can be at least somebody who's going to come in and be a kind of matchup nightmare in your dime packages. You know, he reminds me a little bit of another AFC corner that this coaching staff is going to have a lot of familiarity with, given how much Patriot influence there is, and that's Jonathan Jones, who came in as just a really raw, athletic corner. They brought him in on these dime packages, and he would just get on somebody and stick to him because he's super, super athletic. And Jonathan Jones, we saw, developed into a really nice CB2 for the Patriots. So who knows, maybe Jacorian Bennett can do the same thing for the Raiders. I think this is a really nice pick for them in the 4th round, like I said, so I'm going to give this a B+. Definitely walked away happy with this one. And, hopefully he can turn into something for the Raiders secondary, because good lord, they need it. With their other 4th round pick, the Raiders selected quarterback Aiden O'Connell out of Purdue, and I thought this was a pretty big reach. He was QB 14 for me. I only watched 15 guys, and I had a 7th round grade on him. So I wasn't a huge fan, but I mean, as a backup, he's fine. I get it, I guess. There was a big run on backup quarterbacks around here, so I get why they kind of panicked and just took one. And he's really similar to Jimmy Garoppolo. So, it makes sense. You want a backup that's like your quarterback so you can run the same type of offense. It's ironic. I have written down that he's Jimmy Garoppolo, but not as physically gifted, which is saying something given Jimmy Garoppolo's lack of physical gifts. He's not a good athlete, doesn't have a strong arm, but he has a fine processor. He mostly makes good decisions. Again, very Jimmy G-esque there. He likes to get aggressive. He likes to try some wacky stuff. Again, very Jimmy G there. He's just the type of player that screams fine backup. And I guess in the 4th round, late in the 4th round here, that's fine. I'm not going to nitpick it too much. I'm going to give this a C. Again, not in love with it, but it's fine. And then we move on to the 5th round, and the Raiders got themselves a bit of a steal with safety Christopher Smith out of Georgia. Now, I wasn't very high on the safety class, as most people weren't. And, Smith was one of the few good eggs, so to speak. He was one of the few guys that I did like. I had a 3rd round grade on him, making him my 5th highest rated safety, so getting him in the 5th round is really good value. He's the type of guy that's going to be able to compete for a starting job right away. They've got Marcus Epps as one of their starting safeties, and I think Smith can absolutely give him a run for his money. Now, Smith fell because he ran a bad 40, ran like a 4.6, which, not great. But he plays a lot faster than that on tape. He triggers to the ball super, super well. He's just a really smart safety on top of that. He's versatile. He can play in the nickel. He can play free safety. He can play strong safety. He can be your deep safety that goes deep enough but not too deep. He can come up and play the run. He's a guy with a high floor. And, he's pretty rangy. It's just, he's an inconsistent tackler, which again, I don't like, but at the very least, the effort's there, right? That's one thing I'll tolerate. You can be inconsistent as long as there's effort, and there's definitely effort. And he's a little skinny. But other than that, super smart, super hard worker. Definitely think this is a guy that can be a starter day one for the Raiders. So I'm not going to quite give it an A+, but I will give it an A. Definitely really, really like this pick for the Raiders. Moving on to the 6th round, I'm not going to bullshit you. I know very little about Amari Burney. He came from Florida, played against Ventrell Miller, and I'm not going to lie, when I was watching Ventrell Miller, I don't think this guy did a single thing that caught my eye. Unless I'm forgetting something, but I don't think I am, so it is what it is. I didn't watch him before the draft, caught a little bit after the draft. He's just a developmental linebacker. He's got good speed, likes to hit, probably a special teamer if we're being totally honest. So in the 6th round, that's fine. Gonna give it a B, not gonna spend too much time talking here. Just a fine pick. And then finally, in the 7th round, the Raiders selected interior defensive lineman Nesta Jade Silvera, one of the coolest names in the draft, doubling down on defensive tackle here, and I like this pick quite a bit. I had a late 4th, early 5th round grade on Silvera, so obviously getting him here in the 7th round is pretty good value. 13th best interior defensive lineman for me, so, comparing that to Byron Young, that's 2 spots apart. So you got 11 and 13 in round 3 and 7. But anyways, we're looking at a guy with a low center of gravity, high motor, really stout run defender, good get off, good strength. He's quick for his size. He doesn't quite have the best pass rushing tool belt, but if he can get a little more consistent, he can be a really nice nose tackle. And I mean a really, really nice rotational nose tackle. This is a team that, lost Andrew Billings to the Chicago Bears. You're looking for a guy to kind of fill that role, and I think Silvera can absolutely do that. Won't be as good as Billings right away, but I do think he has the upside to be just as good, if not better, as your average nose tackle. So I'm going to give this pick a B+. In the 7th round, great value. Definitely going to see some snaps for the Raiders, and, getting that in the 7th round is great value. So as a whole, I really, really like what the Raiders did here. Like I said, some steals down the line. Michael Mayer, for example. Getting him as the 3rd tight end off the board, which is crazy. Jacorian Bennett was a nice pick. Christopher Smith was a nice pick. Nesta Jade Silvera was a nice pick. And obviously you get one of my favorite players in the class Love this pick, or love this draft, excuse me, for the Raiders. Because of that, we're going to give them an A. Absolutely love what the Raiders did here. I think they made themselves a better football team with this draft, both immediately and long term. And finally, wrapping things up here with the Los Angeles Chargers. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think I'm going to be quite as high on their draft class as you're going to see a lot of people be. Primarily because of their top 2 picks. I'm going to be honest with you. It's these top 2 picks that are going to hold them back for me, so we'll just go ahead and jump into it. I'm not going to stall any longer. Starting out with wide receiver Quentin Johnston out of TCU, taking him with the 21st pick. I'm going to be honest, I wasn't the highest on Johnston. I had a true second-round grade on him. He was my 4th highest-rated receiver behind Jackson Smith and Jigba, Zay Flowers, and Josh Downs. But that being said, it's not like Johnston's terrible or anything, right? I don't think he's this awful receiver. The big thing is he's going to be adding an element of speed to the Chargers offense, which they don't have with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. That's a pretty big deal. And, you know, he's got a good catch radius when he's not body catching, which is definitely an issue. He's really nice after the catch, which is going to be his big trait. Again, he adds that element to this offense. They don't have a great rack guy, and that's what Quentin Johnston's going to kind of be. He's able to break arm tackles. He accelerates really well. His footwork's really good. He's got a good release, but he's not great against press coverage, so kind of 50-50 there. And he's not a big body ball winner like a lot of people would expect someone of his stature to be, but with Mike Williams there, that doesn't matter a whole lot. And to further reflect that, he had a 35% contested catch rate in college, which is bad, especially for a big body receiver. And I don't know, it's like he almost looks bored as the game goes on, as the game progresses. It's tough. He has potential if you're ironing out some of the wrinkles and, tying up some of the loose ends, so to speak. He's almost... I saw Marcus Whitman, that franchise guy, if you know who he is. He made a couple really good comparisons for Quentin Johnston when he did his draft grades videos, which is actually what inspired this series for me. He's another guy like Brett Coleman that I look up to when it comes to this whole YouTube thing. He said that Johnston is sort of like less of a big body 50-50 guy like you'd expect him to be, and more almost like a Brandon Ayuk, which I don't fully agree with. I don't think he's as good of a route runner as Ayuk. But he also made the comparison that he's like a slower Demaryius Thomas. And I think, may he rest in peace, I think that's a better comparison. I kind of like that, actually. Where he's going to be the type of guy that he's a bigger dude, but he's not somebody you're expecting to win a bunch of contested catches and go up and moss somebody. He's going to be good after the catch. You're going to hit him on crossing routes. He's going to cook on like screens and bubbles and things like that. So again, he just adds a new element to the Chargers offense. So while I don't love Johnston as a player, I do like his fit for the Chargers. I think my grade on him would be a bit lower for any other team. So where some people are going to see this as like an A, I'm going to give this more of a B. Again, it's just because I don't love Johnston as a player. He's a good fit for the Chargers, but I have a lot of issues with his game. Speaking of players that fit well with the Chargers, but I have quite a few issues with their game, their next pick was edge rusher Tuli Tuipulotu out of USC. And I hate saying that, because at the start of the draft cycle when I first watched Tuli, I was a fan. He was fun. He's one of those guys that's got a fun name. He's fun to root for. But he ended up falling down my rankings quite a bit as I watched more and more edge rushers, and then I went back and watched Tuli and found out some numbers that we're going to talk about here in a moment. But just to get some of the semantics out of the way, round 3 grade, so a lot higher than I would have taken him here. You're like at the end of the second round, so maybe not too much higher. Maybe I'm over-exaggerating that a little bit, but a decent bit higher than I would have taken him. 15th ranked edge for me. But this grade is saved a little bit by the fact that there was a bit of a run on edge rushers right before this, so I get it. And again, he fits their scheme well. He's got a good first step. He's strong, especially in his hands. He can win with quickness. He can win with strength. He can win with technique. He's got good bend for his size. He's a good run defender in terms of reading gaps and filling lanes. But my massive issue with him is this guy is a horrible tackler. And I mean horrible. He missed 31.4% of his tackle attempts his final season in college. 31.4%. That's crazy. That's insane. You know, like, missed tackle here and there is fine if you're trying, but 31, damn near, I'm not going to make that stretch and say damn near half. A third of your tackles missed is wild. And on top of that, he's a prettier linear athlete, not the most explosive guy in the world, but at the end of the day, he's somebody that if all else fails, if you can't get, you know, him to be your number 2 opposite Joey Bosa when Khalil Mack's on his way out, then he can at least be a good rotational guy. I don't see a world where Thule sucks and has no role. He's at the very least going to be a good rotational edge that comes in and makes a splash play here and there. So like I said, because of that and because of the run that happened on edge rushers, I am going to give him a B-. Again, I don't love Thule as much as it hurts me to say that, but I do think this is a good spot for him. Like, the Chargers specifically are a good spot for him. Then we move into the third round, and they took the linebacker Daiyan Henley out of Washington State, and I like Henley. For me, he was linebacker 2 behind Jack Campbell, who went in the first round. There was not a single linebacker taken in the second round, which is crazy. But there was a big gap between these two. With Campbell, it was like a late first, early second. With Henley, it's late second, early third grade. He's really good in coverage. He's probably the best overall coverage linebacker in the class. He covers players instead of grass in zone coverage, which is a big deal. He's very, very instinctive. He's a converted wide receiver, so because of that, he's a great ball tracker. He's a really good ball hawk on top of that. He's a good blitzer. He plays against play action very, very well, doesn't fall for the eye candy or the motion or anything like that. He's good in man, good in zone, good tackler. He's a really good athlete. He's a willing run defender overall, but he isn't the strongest guy in the world, and as a run defender, he does lack gap discipline, and he needs to work on shedding blocks a little bit. But ironically, he reminds me a lot of Eric Kendricks, where he's just this fantastic coverage linebacker that's willing to play run defense, even if he isn't the best in the world at it. He can at least try, and he can make a play here and there. And so he's going to get to learn from Kendricks, who's on, I think a 1 or 2 year deal in LA. So I think this is a perfect landing spot for him. And all of a sudden, LA goes from a team that, you know, swears against linebackers to have a pretty solid linebacker duo. So because of that, I'm going to give the Chargers an A. I really like this pick for them. This is not a linebacker class I liked a whole lot, but Henley was someone that definitely stood out, and I think he's a fantastic pick, especially here in the third round for LA. And then to completely flip the script, their next selection here in the fourth round was wide receiver Darius Davis, again out of TCU, and I just don't get it. You know, I'm going to be honest, I didn't watch him before the draft, but I went back, and oh my god, this was a reach. You've got a gadget guy, but there were guys who were better at being a gadget guy. Someone like Tyler Scott, who I've already mentioned once in this video, and I'll continue to mention. He's also a solid returner, but a guy like Charlie Jones was available, who's an even better returner. Like, don't get me wrong, Darius Davis is explosive as a returner, which is really cool, but he had 5 fumbles on punts in college. So you can be explosive all you want. If you can't hold on to the goddamn ball, what's it matter? You know, what's that explosiveness for if you don't have the ball in your hands? And then you look at offense and you think, oh, he's super fast. He's going to add that element of speed the Chargers want on offense. No, he's not. No, he's not. He can't separate deep. He can't fight through contact. He's just fast. It's literally all he is. And again, if you wanted a receiver that was just fast, Tyler Scott was there. Like, this to me is just a way worse Tyler Scott or Charlie Jones or whoever. There were plenty of better options, and you went with the one that's, I'm going to be honest, it hurts me to say this. This is probably this year's Velus Jones. I don't actually know Davis's age off the top of my head, so I don't know if I can make the grandpa argument, but everything else screams Velus Jones to me, man, and that's not a good thing coming from a Bears fan, so I'm going to give this a D-. Again, there's potential there as a returner. Maybe he can become a little more disciplined there and not fumble as much, so I'm not going to quite fail them, so to speak, for this, but a D- is definitely in order. This is a bad pick. Then we get to the 5th round, and the Chargers selected offensive lineman Jordan McFadden out of Clemson, and this is actually a pretty interesting case, because when I finished my draft rankings, I had a 7th round grade on McFadden, and he was my 18th rated interior offensive lineman. And then after the draft, I went back and watched him again in preparation for this video. I liked him a hell of a lot more. I don't know what changed, between before and after the draft. It's definitely not biased. I'm not a Chargers fan or anything, but he reminds me a lot of Zach Tom, and maybe that's what it was. I didn't realize it until after the draft, but I like Zach Tom a lot coming out. He's very athletic. He's got good play strength. He's got good technique. He's kind of like a combination of Zach Tom and Jamari Salyer, right? The only issue with him is he's a little bit shorter, but, you know, as a rotational offense, or not rotational, excuse me, a depth offensive lineman, or maybe even a potential starter down the road, I like this pick for the Chargers quite a bit, so I'm going to give it a B. You know, I'm really surprised that I like McFadden a lot after the draft as opposed to before, but, you know, it is what it is, and I'm going to give this a B. And then we get to the 6th round, and the Chargers selected defensive lineman Scott Matlock out of Boise State, and I'm going to be honest with you, didn't watch this guy before the draft, didn't catch a whole lot after the draft. I actually have to read off my notes here because I haven't even memorized anything about this guy. But he's a solid role player, like he projects to be a solid role player, smooth athlete, good get off. He lacks play strength. He played under 300 pounds and then tested over 300 pounds, so I don't know where he's going to play. He's just a developmental guy that, you know, can maybe be a solid rotational player. So, you know, can't complain too much there. Gonna give him a C+ for this. Nothing crazy, but it's fine. And then we get to the 7th round, and the Chargers selected quarterback Max Duggan out of TCU, making that 3 players from TCU that the Chargers took this year. And I gotta say, I'm a little bit higher on Duggan than I think most people were. I had him as QB 8, 5th round grade. He's a good athlete. He's willing to take shots downfield. He's good in the short game. He's a good playmaker. And he's tough. He's just a fun, like, spark plug backup that's going to come in and do some wacky shit if Justin Herbert, God forbid, goes down. And obviously, he already has that established chemistry with Quentin Johnston. The big knocks on him, his accuracy is very inconsistent. Played in an RPO offense. His footwork's bad. He struggled under pressure. He's just somebody that can be a fine backup. And in the 7th round, you're looking for someone that's going to make the roster, and I think Duggan can absolutely do that. And like I said, he'll be fun during the preseason. And again, God forbid if something were to happen to Justin Herbert, you know, maybe he can cook a little bit. Maybe he can do a little something, have a little Taylor Heineke run, you know, that type of plot armor magic. But at the end of the day, like I said, 7th round, I've already said this before, I'm going to say it again, you want someone that's going to make the team, and I think Duggan can absolutely do that. So I'm going to give him a B for this pick. I think it's fine, nothing crazy, but 7th round, you know. So overall, as a whole, I like the Chargers class a good bit. Again, I'm not as high on Quentin Johnston and Tuli Tuipulotu as a lot of people I've seen are. And that's kind of what holds them back a little bit for me. That and Darius Davis as well. So I'm going to give this a B+. If they would have taken Tyler Scott over Davis, this would have been an A. Or if they would have taken Charlie Jones or about 15 other receivers over Davis, this would have been an A. That's kind of the big downfall for them. But, you know, I like this class for LA. Johnston's going to contribute. Tuipulotu can be fine. Diane Henley is going to be good for them. And then, you know, the rest is just kind of whatever. We'll see when we see. But yeah, overall, pretty solid class. And I think a B+ is pretty justified here. But that's going to do it for this episode of my draft grades, obviously wrapping up the AFC West here. If you made it this far into the video, let me know down in the comments below what you think of my grades, whether you agree, disagree, whichever one it is. Let me know your thoughts, and we can have a fun little conversation about it, because that's always a good time. And on top of that, make sure to tell me who your favorite pick was for each of these teams. For me, I got to go with J.L. Skinner for the Broncos, probably Felix Anudike-Uzomah for the Chiefs, Tyree Wilson, obviously, for the Raiders, and then for the Chargers here, definitely got to go with Diane Henley. But yeah, definitely let me know that down in the comments below. And be on the lookout for more of these draft grade videos coming very, very soon. I promise I'm not going to take 2 weeks in between posting them again. Got stuck in a slump. We're out of it. We're cooking. We're getting ready for the summer because we've got big things planned, a bunch of collaborations, a bunch of fun stuff. You definitely won't want to miss it, so you want to make sure to subscribe to stick around for all that kind of stuff. We're going to be talking about all 32 NFL teams. Each one's going to get their own video this time instead of having to share it with their division rivals, because Lord knows division rivals hate each other. But yeah, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you all enjoyed. And to everyone out there, I hope you all have a wonderful day, night, evening, afternoon, whatever time of day it is for you. I hope you enjoy it, because you're all wonderful people and you deserve it. And also, don't forget, love is love.